Hi, everyone. Nate here. Just a quick heads up that if you enjoy What a Hell of a Way to Die, you can access bonus content in which we publish a new episode every week on our Patreon. The link is in the show notes, and for $5 a month, you get access to all the bonus content we've put out since we started the show back in 2016. Hope you enjoy, and thanks for listening.
Glory, glory, what a hell of a way to die. Glory, glory, what a hell of a way to die. Glory, glory, what a hell of a way to die. He ain't gonna jump no more. Zoom.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of What a Hell of a Way to Die. You got me, you got Nate, and special guest, friend of the show, Ken Klippenstein, the FOIA master, the man with every answer to the questions that you didn't even know you had. Ken, how are you doing today? So
I was gonna call you the man with the golden DMs, but you know that's absolutely not the truth. In fact, the opposite is probably true, given the nice, informative, conservative opinions you get on a regular basis.
Yeah, you really learn the double-edged nature of having open DMs. You get some good tips, and then a whole lot of other stuff too.
Yeah, I don't envy you your direct messages. One day I know that I'm going to hit a tipping point at some point in time. Thankfully, at the moment, it just seems to be YouTube comments telling me that I'm a piece of shit soldier, which I know. I didn't need a racist man wearing sunglasses taking a picture in the cab of his F-150 to tell me that. I already knew those things. So Ken, we started this whole discussion, wanting to bring you on because of an article that you had about using, during the Portland, the upheaval, the protests, the riots, however you want to discuss it. I feel all of those things kind of are words that describe what's happening in Portland. But you were talking about things. You wrote an article about the use of surveillance planes and drones, and I kind of wanted to talk about that as well as anything else that you're working on, because we get a lot of on the street reporting. We have a lot of reporters, both with major news organizations and with smaller organizations that are doing videos and doing interviews and going into these riots. But what you have is something that's kind of pulled back. It's like, hey, look, it's not just the cop, punching you in the face on the ground. It's also this kind of massive surveillance state that has been activated. So can you kind of tell us about what's going on there?
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm trying to do, is show people the context, because Department of Homeland Security is a very young agency. People don't often know how young it is. This is an agency that was forged in the fires of 9/11 and has all the attendant paranoia and authorities that you would associate with the Bush administration executive orders and attempts to consolidate power in the wake of that attack. And then on the part of the public, the sort of Stockholm syndrome that they had, thinking, oh, someone protect us, do whatever you have to. We don't want something like this to happen again. And so I think you mentioned drones a moment ago. That's a really good example of it. People are really shocked to see, for example, a Predator drone idling over Minneapolis when the George Floyd protests began. And, I think they're right to be shocked. But I think that they were part of why they're surprised is because they don't realize that Department of Homeland Security, in this case, Customs and Border Protection, has an entire fleet of aircraft and drones. And that actually is pretty standard. I mean, they're using these drones at the border all the time. I think what was different about this now was that they used it in relation to, what appears to have just been domestic protests. But I was given a document from another source in Customs and Border Protection that detailed the extent of the use of these aircraft between May and July, and it was amazing how many different. Let me read you some statistics. I'll give you a sense of just how broad their resources are in this one respect. And of course, they have a bunch of different. This is what's called air and marine operations. It's part of Customs and Border Protection. So they've logged a total of over 300 flight hours since May, involving 38 rotor wing, 8 fixed wing, and 2 UAVs. And that just gives you a sense of the resources that this agency has accumulated since 9/11. And I think people are sort of surprised. They're like, wait, they do border stuff. Why do they need all of this aircraft? I mean, maybe you could have a drone or something for surveillance, but does it have to be a Predator drone? And so in a way, I think it's been good. And what they're doing now is they're kind of, the mask is kind of slipped off, and they're showing the domestic populace what they can do if they bring those resources to bear against people other than just folks at the border.
Yeah. So you say unmanned, so they are like actual Predator drones that are being used, because unmanned aerial vehicle means multiple different things. I mean, the Army, I know it's like the Raptor ones, which is just a dude throws a styrofoam airplane into the air and has a little motor on it. But we're talking the heavy hitters, like not a global hawk, but something a little bit smaller than that, but also not exactly something that you can fit in your backyard.
Yeah, exactly. And how sophisticated these resources. So, I mean, that was just the air stuff. Another thing people are shocked by that is pretty standard for CBP, Customs and Border Protection, are these BORTAC agents. It's kind of like Border Patrol's equivalent of the Special Forces. They're supposed to, in theory, be kicking down doors in situations where the target is understood to be, armed and it's situations where they expect armed resistance, basically. So they're using these essentially like Special Forces guys to, track, arrest protesters, and people are rightly shocked at all of that. But I mean, this agency has just grown so big. People are often surprised. So, for example, if you compare the resources they have with equivalent Justice Department elements, like say the Marshals or the FBI, Customs and Border Protection is way bigger in numbers in terms of personnel, not just personnel, but resources too. So I think that this agency is sort of swollen to the point that it's becoming a kind of shadow defense department. And that's why I was like excited to talk to you guys about this and hear your thoughts on it, because it seems like when you've got these aerial assets that they do, they're conducting aerial surveillance. They have, not just ground forces, but like specifically like special forces equivalents. These guys use night vision and, get a lot of similar kind of training. It's interesting because it seems like they're doing what the Defense Department was unwilling to do on Trump's behalf when he was trying to get them to agree to deploy active duty. And now the Department of Homeland Security is stepping in and offering them kind of like a lesser trained version of a lot of what Trump was trying to accomplish.
Yeah, no, we're perfectly happy with beating on American citizens. One question I have: where does this, the Customs and Border Patrol, where do they operate? Like, I've always heard about this like Constitution-free 100-mile border around America, right? Like that anywhere within 100 miles of the border, basically Border Patrol gets to operate with impunity. Is that correct? What is the scenario going on there?
Yeah, well, that's what's so interesting about this. So it's not just the for the continental U.S., the Canadian and Mexican borders, but that's also the oceans. So a lot of people were like, wait, this isn't within 100 miles of a border, but in the legal definition of that term, the ocean counts as it. So they are actually within. To me, that's the biggest scandal here, is that a lot of this actually isn't illegal. And I don't know if the media, lacks informedness about this agency, or if they're being disingenuous to be like, oh gosh, we're not okay with this, because, all of this stuff was also legal under the Obama administration and under the Bush administration when people were much less concerned about it. I'm not saying that Trump isn't using it with a sort of aggressiveness and disdain for kind of, maybe if not the laws, certainly like cultural norms around what's acceptable in a free society. That's certainly true. But, they have extraordinary powers because that's what they were granted after 9/11. And so you mentioned the distance from the borders. That's one case that they can kind of derive. It gets tougher when you're dealing with domestic, U.S. citizens that have no relation to immigration and things. And so that's where legal games come in. So what they're trying to do with their deployment in Portland is claim that they're defending federal property. And that's kind of a joke, because all they can say is that what they've tried to argue is that they're defending a federal courthouse and other assets that might be damaged by these demonstrations. I haven't seen a whole lot of evidence. I mean, there's been some, low-level property destruction, but nothing on the order of like needing to keep the state up or something by sending these guys in. But in any case, that's the argument that they're trying to make, is that they're protecting federal assets, and all of this is pursuant to an executive order that President Trump issued. If you guys remember when he made the protecting monuments. I mean, it sounds ridiculous, but that's literally what it was. It was protecting monuments order. I want to read you guys the name of it. It's kind of funny. So the Trump's executive order on June 26 is called Protecting American Monuments, Memorials, and Statues in Combating Recent Criminal Activity. And so within that, he directs DHS to provide assistance with local law enforcement in protecting these memorials, statues. But then critically, in the text of the executive order, it says or property, and that's very broad. That can be interpreted very broadly. And so the way they've tried to go about doing this, and Attorney General Barr actually has a long legal history of coming up with these arcane case law and precedents for deploying federal authorities to to respond to non-federal issues like local issues. So there was a hurricane during the H.W. Bush administration that affected the Virgin Islands, and so he was able to deploy federal forces there on basically similar reasoning to protect federal assets. And he actually did an interview with some sort of legal center where he's bragging about how we were able to twist the laws and come up with this crazy way that probably shouldn't have been. He almost tips his hand and says, yeah, it probably shouldn't have been legal, but we were able to do it. And now he's doing the exact same thing with Portland. I mean, he has a long history of coming up with this stuff. And that is not insignificant, because someone like Donald Trump is not going to have the competence or patience to be able to come up with these things. So he has people around him like Barr who do and can, and I think that's what we're seeing. So he issues that executive order, and then in response to that, Department of Homeland Security creates what's called the Protecting American Communities Task Force, or PACT for short. And so that task force is what describes itself as defending this federal property, which again, there's not a whole lot of federal property, but you can probably say, okay, there's a courthouse here, there's maybe there's a building there, and then that's really the sort of gossamer thin justification they're using for this deployment.
So I'm wondering, for a second, if I can jump in, Francis. I know in the past, Ken, you have had you've spoken to people in various federal agencies, some of whom have expressed dismay at some of the recent taskings or some of the weird mission sets that they're given. And I'm wondering, because a part of me feels like these federal deployments that are taking place wouldn't be happening if there was a significant amount of pushback, or that probably would be harder to muster. Have you encountered people working at DHS who've been like, what the fuck? Or do you feel like as an institution, it's more or less on board with this kind of like the laws mean what we want them to mean kind of mentality?
I've definitely seen the most pushback that I've ever seen within the agency or the department, but that doesn't say much. Unfortunately, Department of Homeland Security is, I think, a uniquely partisan institution. So it was actually designed since its inception to be more receptive to and responsive to the White House's wishes than, for instance, the Justice Department, which, at least in theory, is supposed to be neutral. Now, we're all adults here. We know that's not really how it works. But at least they have the presumption. And there is a sort of cultural, when you talk to FBI people, when you talk to people within justice, that does actually have an effect. And sometimes if they see something that doesn't comport with this obviously fantastical idea of neutrality, like they will be more likely to blow the whistle or more likely to push back. That doesn't exist within DHS. They don't have a Justice Department that they answer to in the same way. And so you end up getting a department that has, the Border Patrol Union, the ICE Union, they all endorse Trump, and with language that is like leaves nothing. It's like very clear that they're for Trump, and I think they understand that he's the best chance of funding and everything. So all of this, a lot of this is institutional because it wasn't designed with the same sorts of safeguards against the politicization that these other agencies have been. And so you really see it become a sort of political wing of the White House. So in the case of Portland, the governor made some statements saying she spoke with Pence and that they're going to draw down the mission. And then the head of Department of Homeland Security, Chad Wolf, or the acting chief rather, he comes out and says, no, we're not, we're going to be there for as long as we need to be. And it's just amazing because it's like you have a governor like the guy comes out and just says, nope, fuck you. We're not doing, and it's great. I mean, compare that to, I'm no fan of the intelligence services or national security, organizations that we have in this country, but it's like, you wouldn't see that, I don't think, with any other agency, someone just going out and just, flatly contradicting what allegedly the vice president said that he wanted them to do. So it's an unusually partisan organization. Certainly there a lot of people think the mission, so when I talk to people, I was talking to Justice Department people that got sent out there because they sent U.S. Marshals. They think the mission is idiotic. They find it beneath them. They think it's ridiculous and, kind of a political stunt. When you talk to DHS people, they certainly, you can find they do think it's like going a little far, but it's not quite the same disgust that you would see with a lot of the other agencies. So unfortunately, I think it really is a sort of I think it is accurate to describe, at least in attitude, that it's starting to resemble a paramilitary, because it is just so thoroughly politicized at this point.
Yeah, it really doesn't. It doesn't feel like there's nothing homeland being secured here. Like, despite what you may think about anarchists, what are they? They're leaving the soup kitchens they work at to go spray paint "all cops are bastards" on a wall somewhere. That doesn't require this kind of response. What you have a homeland security for is to secure the homeland, but it does seem, with especially with a lot of the calls to defund the police, and there have been calls to defund and completely abolish ICE and the Border Patrol for a long time, because despite what we may all think, borders were being secured before border security. There was law enforcement that existed. It's just not in the weird draconian kind of way that we see it now, and all of these apparatuses are being, they want to self-sustain, right? And as you said, they see Trump as their best way of getting more money, because what does Trump see as the best way to deal with an uprising? It's not to negotiate or talk, it's to attack and push back. And if we know anything about the American spirit, considering that we're in some kind of global conflict every 10 to 15 years for an extended amount of time, and considering the entirety of our learning comes from how we have been, how we were born in fire and flame of the Revolutionary War, do you really think shooting people is going to make us like, oh shit, I better stop showing up to protest? It's a ridiculous idea, but again, also force is the only tool that America has in its tool bag. There is no, whether it be, actual violence, whether it be economic violence through sanctions, there's really nothing else that we have in our go-to bag. Like, oh, people are mad at us, what should we do? I don't know, punch them in the face? See if that makes them not mad at us. It didn't work. Well, did you try to fucking punch them harder? I don't know. What do you want from me? I gave you all these guns. Go punch them in the face.
I always think about, to jump in really fast before you respond, Ken, just Bill Barr's comment that he basically said that, we have a constitutional right to peaceful assembly, but if you're resisting law enforcement in any way, then you're by default not peaceful. And it's like, so basically what you're saying is that anything that you want to determine, if you don't like it, then it's automatically illegal. And that mentality just, he seems like a clown, but he seems like a very dangerous clown in that regard.
Well, that's the same with curfews, right? Like St. Louis had curfews, a lot of places had curfews when the protesting was really at its peak, because it's easy to say it's 9:00, everything you guys are doing is illegal now. Like, no matter what, even if they kettle people in, we're going to box everybody in, and then once 9:00 hits, we start shooting tear gas, because that's where the legality comes. And I believe Bill Barr, even, I saw it today, I would have to dig into it, is like, as soon as the cop says, okay, you have to disperse, and you are within an extent like this distance from the police, and they say stand back or disperse, they now have, and they now have every right to do whatever the fuck they want to you, which is absolutely insane, but also not surprising. And I will say, big ups to Eamon Bundy today for coming out for the one BLM that he does like, which is not the Bureau of Land Management. Eamon Bundy came out with in support of Black Lives Matter, in support of protests, really, because fucking he hates the cops just as much as anybody else, unsurprisingly. So, you know, it's a weird time. This is a very fucking weird time to see. And to really see the people who are, you know, pro states' rights and pro, you know, anti-government and, you know, I need my guns to keep the government at bay. But what that means is when the government comes for me, not when the government comes for you. So.
Yeah, I mean, there was one case I'm surprised hasn't been reported more. There was a kind of special forces guy under the Air Force that killed, I think, like 3 cops and injured a bunch, or 2 federal agents and a cop, and then injured a bunch more cops. And if you look at least what's been reported of his sort of ideology, it seemed like he kind of blew up in response to what he perceives as the, you know, federal government stomping around in people's backyards. This was a guy in California. I can't remember what city it was. And I think, unfortunately, we're going to see a lot more violence of that sort. And I wonder if the administration even cares, because as you point out, this has had the opposite effect of what they've claimed, which is to suppress the, you know, civil unrest and get things under order. Because it seems to me that in Portland, the protests have just grown. And actually, that's what officials in Oregon have said is like, okay, so your stated rationale is this, and it's gotten much worse. So why are we still doing this? But, you know, that presupposes that that's really their rationale. When you talk to people in Homeland Security that are a little more critical of it, they'll often say like, oh, he's like, you know, they'll speculate, oh, this is a kind of political show of force. You know, they won't say it in this language, but they'll basically say like he's owning the libs in a deep blue state and in a sort of way that is going to provide a lot of optics and things for his supporters to get excited about. So I wonder if that's what it's about.
Who fucking knows? So Ken, what do you got going now? What's cooking in the FOIA inbox?
Well, I'm always excited. You know, I was disappointed to see that my request was denied to CIA for Jair Bolsonaro's visit to CIA headquarters last year. I feel like that would have been quite funny. I can't imagine there's anything particularly sensitive. I mean, who knows how much sensitive stuff he actually has in his head. I imagine he's sort of like Trump, where he has a lot of functionaries and things do things for him. So I was disappointed they couldn't provide. But he's always so funny how much he's like trying to kiss up to Trump whenever he's around. I could imagine him saying some quite funny things.
Ken, how much of your FOIA requests are just like, I wonder what happened here? Like, and just to like this, like with Bolsonaro, just like, I bet they said some dumb shit.
More than I'd like to admit. Probably the most successful ones are just guided by someone inside that tells me what to look for. Because with FOIA, if you're specific down to like, if you can ask for a specific record as opposed to a more general like stuff on this subject, you're much more likely to succeed. But yeah, I've gotten good ones back just from being like, whoa, this is so dumb. I wonder how dumb, you know, like I know it's gonna be dumb. I wonder how dumb. So in this, yeah, that's certainly what guided this. There was another one like that I did that I still haven't heard back from. Do you guys remember that? Everyone seems to have forgotten this one. Do you remember when Trump was telling, I think it was John Kelly when he was head of DHS, that he wanted to make a moat and fill it with alligators around the border?
Yes, I absolutely remember that.
Yes, I do also remember this, yes.
Yeah, I was pointing and I'm just typing it thinking how surreal it is that I was like, I can't believe I'm writing this down. But yeah, I FOIA'd for records on that. I haven't had much luck yet.
So I was wondering, Ken, because I remember when you reported on some of the intelligence documents that were produced for active duty military that were deployed to the border the end of 2018 into 2019. And you had some great stuff out there that was basically showing that, you know, their priority was to basically, I mean, at least in terms of the classifying language, was referring to protesters as basically like extremists. And it seemed very, if not identical, then certainly proximate to the way that they would go about, you know, identifying targets on a battlefield. Now, I know that you also reach out a lot to people who are in the military to send you information. And it strikes me that sometimes gets you pushback from the DC hot tub brigade, you know, people like John Schindler and whoever that guy is who the death of expertise guy whose name I've forgotten, but who annoys me all the time. And then, you know, various lieutenant colonels' accounts on Twitter. Has your reporting been affected by some of the sort of what I might describe as like high profile appeals that people use their chain of command and their open door policy. Because I mean, I think Francis and I and disaffected vets around the world know that's complete horse shit, but a lot of people really do believe that there's a proper system for reporting it, and that if you do that, then good things will happen. And I'm wondering, has your high profile reporting in that regard, have you found it has like a chilling effect, or has it actually had no effect, or has it maybe even encouraged more people to contact you?
I think it's encouraged more because people see that someone can reach out to me, and I think people will be surprised how many of my sources are not actually like left at all. A lot of my sources are quite conservative, and they're just, I think they kind of like that you don't fit the sort of liberal New York Times kind of prism that they're used to. I think they loathe liberalism more than kind of leftism. Like they might think it's exotic and weird, but I don't think they have the same kind of visceral response to it as they do with even someone who's not liberal, but just kind of like, I don't know, what would you describe David Brooks as? Like, that's the kind of thing they hate.
Yeah, well, that inside the Beltway kind of DC, like it's not even liberal. It's DC talking head, which like I think I hate reporters in DC more than I hate reporters in New York City who believe that nothing happens outside of New York City, because at least that I can ignore. But like DC people feel like I'm at the capital of this great country, therefore I have the ability to speak on things that are happening around this country. And it's like, you live in a fucking shitty apartment inside the Beltway, man. You don't know anything about anything outside of Virginia. I don't know why you're trying to come talk to me about it. So I think that's what it's more of a.
I definitely think that there's an extent to which somebody in the spectrum of between, let's say, David Brooks and Nancy Pelosi annoys conservatives more than somebody who's like an anarchist running a soup kitchen. I mean, in the sense that if you're really radicalized by Fox News shit and like forwarded boomer emails, then you're going to think that anybody who identifies as a leftist or an anarchist or a Marxist is, a domestic terrorist who's trying to do ISIS on you. But at the same time, I think that if people actually aren't that like, I don't know, culture war derangement syndrome, Fox News radicalized, when they meet people and they talk to them in any capacity, I think that we, at least the better communicators among the further left fringes, I think, try to communicate in a way that's not like condescending or like with a sense of superiority, if that makes sense. Whereas I feel like the very kind of partisan Democrat stuff and the very kind of centrist lib stuff has a tendency to be so, I don't know, like uninspiringly condescending. And I definitely think that in my experience, you'll find people with more common ground who are conservative-ish when they meet people who are like, who are not only anti-gun control, but also just like they're kind of living out their principles. That's my theory. Some people are deranged and they're never going to stop, and they're always going to be like forwarded email Maureen Todd shit. But some people can find common ground, I think, in that regard. And like, I don't trust Ammon Bundy. I mean, he's said some really, really racist shit in the past, but also I think that kind of weird Ammon Bundy crossover is indicative of how you can find these strange alliances or like, overlaps in viewpoint. And it doesn't surprise me that people are they would probably be less receptive to you if you were, a David Brooks character, but because you're not, that's probably something they haven't really encountered in news media.
Exactly. I can't tell you how many sources I've had where they'll tell me something I'm just shocked by. And they're like, oh, I know this isn't a story. I'd be like, how do you know that's not a story? Like, oh, well, I tried to contact someone at one of the sort of mainstream outlets and he said that it wasn't a story. Because reporters, they won't admit that their institution won't run something. They'll just tell you, oh, this isn't actually, they can't differentiate between cases in which their institution doesn't want something out versus like, it genuinely, because some stuff genuinely isn't a story if it's just, like kind of minutia or something. But like, so they'll come to me and then they'll be like, wait, this was a story? I'll be like, yeah, they just don't want to run it because it's going to embarrass whoever it is that they, the access kind of arrangement that they have set up.
Yeah, the person they lean on for sources and shit.
Right. But they're not honest about it. Like, I wish they could just say like, I'm not. So for example, if I can't do a story, say I don't have the right audience for it, or it's not something I do, I try to find some other reporter, because there always is someone that there are so many different websites now, but other reporters don't do that. I don't know if it's like hits their pride or something that their institution won't touch it, but they just go, nope, there's nothing there. And then, that's really where I'm kind of a bottom feeder, where I'm like going and picking up these things that got, either they tried to report it through the proper channels and it didn't work out, or they tried to report it through the sort of, because all they know of media is just kind of the big stuff that they see out there. So they're going to think, all right, well, what are the big outlets or whatever, and they send it. And unfortunately, all those outlets have like pretty similar kind of ideological allegiances, I guess. So it's like really heartbreaking how many people you'll see. They'll be like, yeah, I sent it to like 3 places and they didn't want it, so I just decided that it wasn't newsworthy or whatever.
Yeah, that's. And I know it does help to have a somebody in, like, to know somebody. Like if you knew somebody at Washington Post, or if you know somebody at New York Times. But yeah, I have no idea. It's like, what do you email tips@newyorktimes.com? Fucking fuck off with that. Like that's not.
Well, yeah, to have Charlie Savage call you a fuckhead. I mean, like, him and the rest of the dudes he went to Harvard with. Like, let's be perfectly honest. Those people, their sources are general officers. Their sources are on the Raytheon fucking board. Like it. That's not to say they're not diligent reporters, but sometimes it's almost like a class thing. If that makes sense.
That's exactly it. Like that's exactly it. Like so many. People's politics are not very thought through in general. Like, if you're someone that's really read up on stuff and thought about it, it's probably hard for you to imagine. But a lot of people, for whatever reason, their brains don't require that degree of like consistency and coherency. So you'll see people that have this weird hodgepodge of ideas, some of them good, some of them bad. But the main thing is that they see that you're an outsider too. They see that I'm probably disliked by people they hate, or I'm, not, like I didn't go to some fancy school like they did, and that's really where I find, if I were to say that there was a common kind of quality in a lot of the people that reach out to me and I think really help take risks and in order to inform the public, it's that they're outsiders more than that they're necessarily like right or left.
Ken, you're a good Midwest boy from the heart of America. Who can not trust you?
That's what they always say. You're a good kid. You're a good kid. That's what all these guys say.
So what else has been like on the back burner lately, or that you're actually working on? I mean, you talked about some of the stuff that you were trying to get on Jair Bolsonaro, which would be amazing. But I'm wondering, like, is there anything else that in the recent, since we first reached out to you about coming back on, has anything else like popped up that's really gotten your curiosity that you can talk about at this moment?
Yeah. I would say in general, Trump tried really hard to get the DOD to become more of a politicized thing that he could use during the election. I know more of this than I'm able to write yet. And he was rebuffed. And, I know that we all, have healthy skepticism about that institution. But, let it be said, they weren't willing to go where Homeland Security is willing to go. And the stuff in Portland is just the beginning. I had a story about this a couple weeks ago describing how they've already kind of launched this across the country. I know that they've been sending intelligence officers, not just from within DHS, but even from Justice Department, FBI, to these different cities that are going to become kind of clones of the Portland experiment. So they're going to be sending them to Chicago. They're going to be sending them to New York City. Basically, every major blue city, they're going to try to do what they did in Portland. And what's creepy about it to me is that, we've all seen the reporting around the unmarked cars and the, people in military fatigues. That's the BORTAC units. But what hasn't been discussed very much, and I'm going to be reporting more in the near future, is the extent to which they've been sending intelligence officers out to do stuff that's not clear to me what exactly it is. They'll ask for volunteers and they won't tell anyone that doesn't volunteer what it is. So I don't know yet what exactly they're doing, but one can imagine. Maybe they're working with the fusion centers. Maybe they're I imagine they're not sending federal intelligence officers out because these places already have. I mean, we've given local police so much. We've got the 1033 program, the Defense Department. We give them all these resources. So for them to be sending out additional intelligence experts alongside that suggests that there's something more going on than what is publicly known about what we've seen in Portland.
That the fusion cell concept is really kind of terrifying, because that is definitely something that, you saw in the global war on terror with, the military being augmented by other government agencies, and oftentimes, they would have representatives from different commands and different theaters and things like that on site. And so when you say fusion cell, to me, or fusion center, the first thing that comes to mind is that, like, well, you have your garbage, your local police, and you might have state police, and you might have state troopers, and you might have, county sheriffs and stuff like that. And that strikes me is the idea of them, basically all the people who are shitheads who don't want to respect what the mayors and governors of these cities are telling them are going to be in one room, but then you have basically sympathetic federal ears, if that makes sense.
Yeah, exactly.
And they're sort of like planning out what they're going to do next and sharing information. That's really the fusion cell concept. It's just extremely fascist fusion cell, basically.
Yeah, the common ground that police, this sort of instinctive identification the local police have with the feds, particularly especially DHS, is really troubling, and I wish I would get more reporting. So in one of the documents that was given to me from someone in DHS showed that they couldn't find, when they were asked by Congress to provide examples of which police departments they are providing support to and which they aren't, because that's kind of the euphemism they're using is, oh, we're helping local law enforcement. They said they couldn't think of a single example of a local police department that was that explicitly told them, no, we don't need assistance. And the thing is, I don't think they're lying. I think that if you were to just poll these local police departments, every one of them would be like, oh, great, more resources, not just DOD, now we got DHS.
Who doesn't want more guns? I mean, if you said to me, Francis, would you like some more guns for free? Yes. Of course I would. Why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't the cops,
When you look at this distinction, it really breaks down when it's law enforcement, the distinction between local and federal, because they have common cause on all of this stuff. And as I said, intensely political. The local police are intensely political too, in the same way that DHS is. Not only are they furiously pro-Trump, I can't think, is there a single major city where they have any sort of what could be described as like, I don't know, constructive or like okay relationship with the municipal government? In every one, they're at swords points with the mayor and with the city leaders. So
yeah, I mean, if you look at Chicago and Portland, I think those are two really good examples. But it definitely seems like the cops in America in general are like to the right of the Republican Party in terms of being completely deranged and detached from reality. And the more liberal the city governance is, the more liberal the leadership of the city or state is, the more likely they're basically just sort of like, I don't know. It's like playing a World War II simulator. You're like, oh yeah, you guys have to have your rear guard security handled by Nazi soldiers. That's just the way it works. Like, it's insane. But they're basically they're unaccountable, and like reality doesn't exist to them. I mean, a guy that I'm mutuals with on Twitter has constantly posted screenshots from the Chicago police blog and police scanners of how they've been convinced that there's a bus caravan of Antifa coming from Indiana, and it's like they at one point I think there was like 50 buses full of Antifa are coming from Indiana. It's like, number one, I don't think you can fill that many buses with Antifa from Indiana on a short notice. And number two, don't you guys have like $1 billion satellites and drones and shit? Couldn't you see a 50 bus fucking convoy just driving up I-90? But the cops don't exist in reality. And that tension between them and, Lori Lightfoot or Jacob Fry in Minneapolis, or the mayor of Portland, whose name I can't remember, like all this stuff, it's mind-blowing how much they see their role to basically, I don't know. I don't want to sound too, maybe I'm in a bad mood because of the Bill Clinton shit today and some of the other stuff with the Democrats today, but we have this running joke on the show that the sort of Nancy Pelosi ethic is basically like, oh, well, you might have voted that way, but you voted wrong, so we're just not going to listen to you. Like, it's basically that, but like the dark fascist version of that, which is like, oh, you might have laws and you might be elected, but that doesn't count. What matters is what I feel in my heart, which is that I'm going to like 5 tweets about cannoli and 100 tweets about murdering people. Like, that's the American cop mentality.
One of the things that was just incredible during the beginnings of the COVID outbreak was how much Andrew Cuomo, the governor of New York City, would just kiss the ass of the cops constantly.
No. Bill de Blasio.
Cuomo's the governor, right? Okay, so yeah.
De Blasio's got this whole history behind it because he managed. I'm sorry to derail this, but Ken, I'd love to get your comments once you're done. But the big story with De Blasio is De Blasio's wife is black, his children are mixed race, and I think the best way to describe it is that his children would be, the cops would identify them as black regardless of how they self-identified. And he basically said at one point that he's had to have a conversation with his own son when his son was 15 about how to behave in public, because with regard to the police, that obviously the police treat young black kids differently and more aggressively than they do than white kids. And this was the same year as the Black Lives Matter initial protests in Ferguson. And basically the Fraternal Order of Police around the United States paid to fly cops into the funeral of 2 NYPD who were murdered in Brooklyn, basically to turn their backs on de Blasio. And they've been running a full-on meltdown ever since about how de Blasio is the Marxist puppeteer, even though he's just a lazy idiot who sucks at his job. And there's been this ongoing campaign where de Blasio has tried to be as deferential to the cops as possible when, and I'm not joking, on the New York City equivalent of that Chicago cop blog, there was, in 2014, I think, there were some comments made by some NYPD who basically said that they had sources telling them that de Blasio's daughter was a heroin user and they were going to try to slip her a hot bag so she'd OD. And it was your cops are talking about killing your kids. They doxed your kids this year, on their Twitter account. They don't give a fuck about you, and they don't respect your authority. But every single time, dude, he just comes out and he's just the NYPD's, and New York's finest, the bravest, they're fighting for America. And then the cops get on their thing and they're like, this fucking Marxist must die. Do it yourself. Kill him. End him. And it happens over and over again, and he just never seems to admit it.
Yeah, and I mean, look, we've got plenty of people. We've got what's his name, Ted Cruz, who the president called his wife stupid and ugly, and suggested that maybe his dad was a serial killer. And we've had our differences in the past. No, man, no, what, no. But that's just the way. That's just I don't know. It's a weird conservative mindset or weird political mindset. I don't know, to always be trying to pay deference to somebody who is trying to tell you to go kill yourself. I don't know. I've been told to go kill myself. I just mute those people and move on with my life. It's Bill de Blasio needs to start muting people on Twitter.
Is there a better description of Democrat party mindset though than the police doxing your daughter and you constantly defending them at every turn? I can't think of a better descriptor.
They don't really seem to be good at identifying the fact that there's such a thing as having political enemies and actually moving against them.
No.
They just think that if they do good, then the teacher will come in and just tell everyone assign credit based on how well the hall monitor reports you did. And it's that's not how, I don't know. They just a failure to grasp reality in a way, not that different from American cops, but just American cops are deeply unhinged. Democrats are just deeply, I don't know, pathetic.
It reminds me of how futile John Kasich's campaign was in 2016, where everyone is just screaming blood and soil, and Ted Cruz is we need to send the military in to get Muslims or what. He has some crazy thing. We're gonna make the sand glow, and then Donald Trump is Muslim ban, and then all of that din, and then it's just John Kasich is let's stop fighting.
That's guys, can't we just get along? Well, there was a thing, and this might make you laugh, Ken, because you're from Wisconsin. But I remember years ago, in the aftermath of the Tea Party movement and the midterms in 2010, and under Scott Walker, the Wisconsin Republicans were going full bore into stuff like voter ID laws and redistricting and all the kind of garbage that they did that made Wisconsin basically, it's almost numerically impossible for Democrats to control the state. Actually, and forgive me if I'm misrepresenting any of that before I move on. But I remember reading a blog post from a guy who was a member of the Republican Party, and he had resigned out of disgust because he basically said, the usual caveats, I'm a Republican, I believe in small government and free enterprise and blah, 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 and all that stuff. But I mean, he basically had the take of but I also want other people to come to this mode of politics, and I think we can win because we present a compelling case. And all day long with all the things that I do in the Republican Party in Wisconsin, it's just people licking their chops and hell yeah, let's make it so no black people can vote. And he's they're not even shy about it. And I wish people would just acknowledge that these people aren't hiding what their intentions are. But I don't know, the credulousness with which the Democrats have a tendency to approach the enemy or their opponent is such that like they constantly believe that everyone just wants good things for everyone. It's like, no. And that leads us to why we brought you on the show today, which is now DHS is rolling around in multicam in like fucking nicer kit than basically anyone aside from Delta Force has in the US military, and throwing people into rental cars and disappearing them.
Yep. And look, all this stuff was happening before the feds even showed up, which is just I'm all about kicking the feds out, but you're still going to get tear gassed and beaten. And now the cops are just going to realize, hey, we can disappear people, as they did in New York City. That we can do these things too. So while it's good to push the DHS out of these cities, it's certainly not a definitive end to how this story goes. You know, it's just you're getting rid of one enemy so you can focus on the other one. Because otherwise, I mean, what else are do we really believe that there's like one of those like in cop movies or something where they're like, oh, the fucking feds are here, you know, this is our case, should be the ones to crack it, not the FBI. No, they're just like, cool, more people to bash heads. They're just going to bash heads over there. We're going to bash heads over here. We're going to do the Predator handshake meme together about, you know, throwing Marxists into walls or something. And that's just what we have. I mean, that's where we are right now with policing in America. Is you like, if you're not a cop, you're the enemy of cops. That's really what it comes down to. Like, it feels like police just assume that like when you show up, like if you're around and there's a cop there, I already feel like I'm in you know, that there's, it just feels like there's already something there, like that we both see each other as an enemy without any even looking at each other. That's it. That's all it takes. And it really does have that feeling now. And I'm a fucking middle-aged white dad, so I can only imagine how much worse it is for literally anybody else.
Ken, so my question is, given that you have to dig through some really distressing stuff on a regular basis, and a lot of basically your reporting is kind of taking the lid off of a lot of really disturbing things, I'm wondering, we've asked you about a lot of things that are concerning. Have you seen other things that have surprised you in a positive way with regard to people pushing back and like solidarity between groups that you weren't expecting? Like, has there been anything in these past couple of months where you've been really like pleasantly surprised?
Absolutely. I mean, every time a source reaches out, and the risk, I mean, these people are talking to me in a way that they could get fired during the like economic collapse of the century, you know, of the last like 80 years, and they're risking losing their jobs during that. That is like very, and the fact that many of them are either apolitical or maybe even, you know, not MAGA people, but conservative. I think I describe a lot of them as culturally conservative. That is actually sort of encouraging to me in that it shows how skin deep a lot of people's supposed political affiliations are, and that there is a kind of moral dimension to people that I don't think is quite captured by you know, when you ask them like, oh, like are you a Republican or a Democrat or something, and then as you start to talk to them about these things and these questions of you know, accountability start coming up, you realize, wait, this person could have been this person could have been a leftist in a different context. They just haven't seen it articulated in a way that, do you know what I mean? Like,
they haven't seen the light.
Well, it's like, I guess it's encouraging, because when you do look at people in terms of like, okay, here's what I think my politics are, and then you see them behave a different way, you realize, whoa, maybe things could shift. Because people are taking these enormous risks that go against everything their purported ideology, you would think it would say. You know, maybe there's something underneath that, and maybe there's some way that a political movement could help to express that more. So, yeah, I would just say anyone that reaches out to me, it very often is quite encouraging, like how they think about things. And none of that was taught to them. I mean, no one's teaching them, hold your authorities accountable. You don't learn that in school. You don't learn that you're certainly not learning that in the military or in DHS. But there's something else to people that that makes them, that gives them some kind of moral impulse. I don't know quite what it is, but I see it again and again.
Well, that's really good to hear, man. I mean, obviously, like in the midst of some really, really bad shit, and we appreciate you taking the time to come on the show. Francis, do you want to introduce the dad chat?
Yeah. I mean, it's just one more time of me and Nate. We haven't actually recorded it, so I don't know what we're going to talk about, but it is Nate and I talking about our gardens, our music. Somebody suggested that, Nate, you and I do a dad chat that is just music, and I said that's just us talking about Smashing Pumpkins. So,
can do.
Yeah.
Hey, Ken, you're always invited too, as a fellow Midwesterner. If you want to, as you approach the dad years in age, if you want to jump on one time, and we just do an unscripted hour-long episode where we just talk about whatever, and most of the time it's gardening, cooking, or music.
Well, I'm a dog dad, so does that count? I feel like we're gonna we need to expand.
I don't even have any pets, man. Like somehow it's a dad chat, and I don't have kids or pets.
It turns into a mentality. Like once you hit
a mentality.
Yeah, once you hit like 35 years old, you become just like, I just want to putter. I want to have some like small hobbies. You know, some people like you can either have a midlife crisis or you can build a workbench and start getting into wood turning or something. You know,
well, I'm 32, so I'm almost there.
Almost, man.
I'll let you guys. The jury's out on psychotic midlife crisis or coming on the show, but we'll figure it out then.
How often do you wake up and your back hurts just from sleeping?
I literally just got a hot pad for my back.
Okay. You're on, Ken. That's it. It's done. You got a hot pad. If you have ever had to go from a hot pad to a cold pad, then you're welcome on. Yep, you're on Dad Chat now.
Oh, God.
I wanted to bring it back to gas stations for a second because the reason I asked you about it was one of the coolest places for weird gas station convenience store food in America, in my opinion, is Hawaii. Because Hawaii's got so many influences from Filipino cuisine and Japanese cuisine and Native Hawaiian cuisine and just like a culture of being chill and hanging out. And so like you can get, it's not as good as dim sum from 7-Eleven in Hong Kong, which, you know, Hong Kongers will laugh at because it's garbage, but it's better than any fucking food at 7-Eleven in America. But in Hawaii, you can get great, weird gas station food. You can get, if you want, I mean, I've seen people selling taro porridge and stuff like that, which is a very Native Hawaiian thing. I've seen that they'll sell something called spam musubi, which is like a big, it's kind of, remember I was describing the Korean equivalent of sushi to you? Yeah. It's just like rice and some kind of meat and seaweed. A spam musubi is basically rice, fried spam, and seaweed. And you can buy them in gas stations in Hawaii. And obviously also Alaska has this too, the culture of like, there are coffee shops for sure, but maybe even more commonly, there are just like trailers in parking lots that are drive-thrus to get coffee from. And like, you can get, trailer that sells smoothies, which in that fucking climate is amazing. In Alaska, the coffee trailers are super, super common too. But in Hawaii, you could go to like a parking lot, go to a coffee trailer, get an iced coffee, go into the 7-Eleven or the gas station and get, like spam musubi. There's a thing called lihing mui, which is like a sweet concentrated spice, almost like a I don't know how to describe it. Like acidic chili spice sugar that they'll sprinkle on, like I've seen it on cocktail drinks. But the thing that I remember the most from gas stations in Hawaii was getting lihing mui on dried mango slices. And some of it's like, regional or national brands that sell it. But sometimes it's literally just like someone's made it and is selling it in the gas station kind of thing. So I'm just telling you, if you ever have a chance to go there, especially if you go to the Big Island, which is just way more rural and kind of like wilder in a way than Oahu, you can get such incredible gas station food. And it's just like, I mean, honestly, man, I've been joking with Cynthia that like if we have kids and we move back to America, we would move to probably a city in the Midwest. If we don't have kids, just fucking move to Hawaii. I don't give a shit.
Go for it.
Rules, honestly.
You can live on the beach.
Yeah, I mean, nothing sounds like a better idea for a redhead than to live on the beach.
Well, I mean, Joe Kasabian's living there, so you, me, and Joe, and we could finally form an island podcast enclave.
He's on Oahu, though. I don't know if Oahu's where like normal jobs are. Like it's a much more urbane place, and obviously like Honolulu is like a city of 1 million people. But I'm kind of partial to the Big Island just because it's the only place I've really spent time. I mean, I've been to Oahu a little bit, but not like literally just landing in one terminal and then taking a bus and then like having time to kill and fucking around outside the airport or taking it, the airport into the city, bus into the city. But I've actually spent, I think a grand total of like a month on the Big Island. And I mean, I really like it there, but obviously Hawaii in general is, people famously say, fuck it, I'm moving to Hawaii, I'll never leave. And then like a year later, they're like, get me off this island. So, I mean, it's one of those things where it's always nice in principle, but obviously like Hawaii's got its own issues. And, one of the big issues with Hawaii is that everything is massively expensive because the economy is, to the point of destroying the environment, is reorienting itself around, catering to white tourists from the mainland. But I don't know, Hawaii is cool as shit, man, honestly, and best gas station food in America, in my opinion. But if you're listening and you think I'm wrong and you want to defend the honor of Sheetz or Wawa or, oh my God, Citgo in Indianapolis, when they used to the Citgo at 116th and Rangeline Road in Carmel that used to sell the big slushies for 99 cents. You get like a Mountain Dew slushie for 99 cents. That's in its way gas station food culture. It's just the Midwest equivalent. It's not as cool as spiced mango slices and fucking spam musubi.
Now the real Midwest gas station is the Come and Go.
That fucking name, man. Yes, CUMNGO. Come and Go. I love it.
It's
or
KUM.
KUM rather. Yeah.
The Come and Go. The wife and I last weekend, out of a fit of stir craziness, drove down to Springfield for the just for a weekend. Springfield, Missouri, keeping our diseases inside the state. But yeah, Come and Go, man. It's all over the place. I love it.
So what is funnier to you, the name Come and Go or the seafood restaurant Captain D's?
Dude, I have such good memories of Captain D's. Captain D's used to be like when I was, probably, but like between the ages of 7 and 9. That's where our family dinner was. We would go to a Captain D's, and I hated seafood, but we would always go, and they had a burger on the menu. So I would get
popcorn chicken as well as popcorn shrimp, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. So yeah, Captain D's, and also my favorite Mexican restaurant now is in an old Captain D's. So Captain D's is always going to be a happy part of my life. However, it's never, honestly, it's never popped into my head about it being Captain Dick until literally you just said it. So now,
really? Because my friends and I always used to joke about Captain, to the point where Cynthia thought I was completely insane because there was this Thai restaurant that was literally in the. She lived in an apartment complex in Wakefield, Rhode Island, when we first started dating. That had like an adjoined, strip mall commercial center. I mean, it was sort of like a slightly upscale one where it's kind of like a little like walk around the village kind of thing. But it's like, imagine like a quaint a property developer's dream version of a quaint New England village town center, and it's got like vape shops. Like that's 100% what it was. But there was this really good, in my opinion, Thai restaurant called Tong D, and I could not stop making jokes. And she's like, "What the fuck is wrong with you?" I'm like, I'm sorry, I grew up in Indiana where we have Captain D's, and like it's just endlessly a joke.
No, that's just you growing up as a male in America.
Yeah, fair.
Can't stop the dick jokes.
Yeah. But I mean, like, I was never really a big fan of any of the fast food drive-through seafood places like Long John Silver's or Captain D's. Like, to me, I mean, I didn't even really like Red Lobster that much. I'm not like so bent out of shape that I'm like, hell yeah, I've got to have seafood. If I'm in a place that's famous for seafood, that has good seafood available, like when I was in Korea or when I was in Thailand, absolutely, hell yeah, get some seafood. Like when we were in Hua Hin for a training exercise in Thailand, we got taken out by there was some the U.S. Army Special Forces has like a really big element in Thailand. Like it's called like I want to say it's called like Thai sock or some shit like that. I can't even remember anymore. But they took us out to this place that like had been featured on Andrew Zimmern's show, and I got like this. It wasn't sea bass, but it was some massive fucking fish, and it was incredible. But like the backside of the restaurant was a boat dock. That level of seafood, like that's where I'll be like, hell yeah, let's eat seafood. But if I'm in Bedford, Indiana, I don't think they're piping in the good shit. You know what I mean?
Yeah, if I can see the environment that you pulled the fish out of, I'm more, into having fish. Like the last time I really enjoyed seafood was in Monterey, California, where
Oh,
like
hell
they
yeah,
have
yeah.
they have like an entire dock that is just seafood restaurants, and it's like here we are, and there's the ocean that all this came out of, so enjoy yourself. But yeah, St. Louis, like the only thing that you're gonna get fresh here is maybe catfish, and catfish just it always tastes like river dirt to me. Like I've never had catfish that doesn't taste like the mud that it eats all day, and I don't like it's one of those foods that it's a it's I don't want to say a poor people food, but lobster back in the day. Lobster once upon a time was just like it's that sea bug that we feed like our horses and the servants.
Yeah,
And
I mean,
now
lobster
is
back in
this-
the day, they didn't trawl for it out in the ocean. They just picked them up when they were dead.
Right.
So
So-
it probably tasted gross as fuck.
Right, but so catfish is the same way. People are like, oh, catfish is just this great and wonderful like fish that fresh water, and oh no, it's gross. I don't go for it. But I'm not a seafood person in general. I don't like all fish kind of taste the same to me. And it has that fishy taste, and it's just not what I'm into.
I mean,
So
I obviously got spoiled on salmon and halibut when I lived in Alaska. Not because it's cheap there, because it's fucking not cheap at all. It's actually really expensive there. It's more that I knew people who fished, and invariably they had, they never parked their cars in the garage because the garage was full of fucking snowmobiles and freezers full of moose and fish stuff. So you could just, people were like, oh yeah, here, have this halibut that I caught, a year ago or whatever. And it was incredible. But halibut's good. Salmon's incredible too. But I mean, obviously, you know what it's going to taste like. No matter what seasonings you put on it, like salmon's going to taste like salmon. And so at the end of it, I kind of just, I'm not, I wasn't super bent out of shape about oh, I really, really have to have seafood all the time. Lobster's good, but it's not, I'm not dying to have more lobster.
be sure to follow Ken at Ken Klippenstein and his wife, Mrs. Krassenstein, on Twitter.
No, you had to sneak that one in. This is the closest I've ever got to an interview with you guys where you didn't mention it. You had to put it at the very end.
Honestly, it's just not even that much of a joke anymore since they're banned and she's really not, or whoever is running that account, it's just not as prolific or as funny as the Klippenstein brothers, the property brothers of Twitter. But other than that, Ken, thanks for coming on. Thanks for coming and dissing the military and the government with us, as we all really love to do. And here's hoping that everybody stays safe. Everybody wear your helmet because it's getting worse and worse. And be sure to, if you want to be a real doomsday prepper, make friends with your neighbors. Be sure that you can count on one another because in reality, an apocalypse event doesn't turn everybody into weird, goofy, lone wolf people. It solidifies communities. So be a part of a community. Be mindful and cognizant of the people around you because that's really one of your biggest strengths that you have in this world at this point. Nate, did you have anything else?
No, that's it, man. I appreciate it. But we will talk to everybody next week.